Sorry, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You were doing such a good job. Okay. We know that Kyle is going to be late. You made it. Welcome, Nate. Is Maria on the phone yet? Maria?
Hello.
Are you there? Okay, very good. So Kyle, we know is going to be late. We don't know if that's after here. That's good, I think.
Yeah.
Anybody else? No? Okay.
Marion, you said you sent out this PowerPoint already?
Yeah.
What was it? Oh,
It went out from Tiffany, I'm sorry.
Oh, obviously you haven't read it.
No.
I printed my own copy.
Bless your heart. Thank you for doing that.
I'm ahead on that. I don't know if I got this PowerPoint.
Okay, it came from Tiffany. So
Oh, that's right. We're gonna wait.
we're doing a PowerPoint this afternoon. We're going to get started now. Thank you, Mayor. We know what you had something else you had to deal with. Kyle is.
They wouldn't let me leave.
Kyle is going to be a little bit late. He got a sudden meeting also today, so we're going to go ahead and get started. We have a lot to cover today. This PowerPoint that you're seeing, Tiffany sent out to you about 1:30 today. So you should have gotten an email from Tiffany with this PowerPoint. So, and I haven't looked at my email, quite frankly, since then to see, but she was sending it out to you. So you do have this as well, and you have the memo which was sent out last week. So we do want to get started. Last fall, Mayor Matson asked Alderman Dickman, Dunn, and I to develop recommendations for how the city might use the funds coming from the Heritage sale. These are unrestricted funds. You got a memo last week detailing the recommendations. So today what we're going to do is review them and discuss them and listen to feedback and other thoughts. So we wanted to go through sort of the process we used. We did a series of interviews, emails. Alderman Ambrose, I'm sorry. Come in. And with staff, elected officials, experts, potential community partners, saying how would you see these dollars being used? We took notes. We had meetings that were virtual and in person. It was a combination. We took notes at each meeting and typically would discuss whatever the interview we had had with the person, what we had found that week. And before we closed out our session. So we sort of met regularly over that time. We debated early on whether we thought we should have a wide versus a narrow focus, and we opted that we wanted a narrow focus on a few programs. We said we do not want to spread dollars across many programs. We felt like that would hurt the impact, and that by focusing on a few very important things, then we could do a better job with the dollars, or our recommendations would do a better job. We also very much wanted programs that would require additional matching dollars. We wanted these dollars to grow dollars, and that could be grants and public or private funding, but we wanted others kicking into this process. We didn't want initiatives that would build larger layers of bureaucracy where we could avoid it. We were concerned about that. We wanted the dollars to go toward programs, and we admitted a bias to programs with tangible, measurable results. So those are kind of the strictures we gave ourselves. 3 other people might have had different ones, but that's what we chose. We'll start off. I just kind of want to go through our process today. We're going to go through the recommendations. The task force will be presenting. We do have our staff here to answer professional questions. This is the staff proposal. It is not the staff's proposal. It is our proposal. There are 2 of these recommendations that are very future-oriented and will require additional planning and talking about. One has been talked about extensively, and it's been researched by staff extensively, and there's new evolving information today. So we'd like to stop after the first recommendation for discussion and then proceed to the second and third recommendations, which have a close tie, and then do that discussion at the end of those 2. So we've got Rick to lead us off with recommendation number 1.
So our first recommendation, we've all talked about the Juvenile Assessment Center for probably about the last 4 years. We know that youth crime in our area is a growing concern, not only in Davenport, but in the region. We know that this is a problem that we can't, as a city, we cannot solve by ourselves. So we're seeking partners, but what we're asking for is $1 million commitment so we can get this program kick-started out in the community and get other folks, other entities with the buy-in. So, the JAC, you know, it's community-based, staffed by clinicians, managed by a lead agency based on prevention and everything you see up there. But what we think that will do is this program will provide a coordinated site which contributes to the safety of youth, families, and the members of the community through early intervention, comprehensive assessment, and improved access to appropriate services within the community. So it's a two-pronged approach. One is the law enforcement side of it, and the other is a community-based program. The community-based program is one we're really looking at really hard. Is how do we get these kids before they get to the other side to where we really have problems. So our staff has created a task force comprised of law enforcement partners, city officials, school officials, Department of Human Services, juvenile court services, 7 judicial representation, and have worked for more than 2 years to bring this concept to fruition. I want to thank the police chief and our staff, Sarah and Corey Spiegel, for working on this. And I think I was going to have Sarah say a few words about where we're at with this process.
So, we've been meeting, the chief and I sit on a task force made up of multiple partners throughout the county, made up of the school district, other law enforcement agencies, services, detention, DHS, some public or some private service providers as well. We are at the point now where we are ready to partner with the United Way to launch an RFP process to find a service provider for the community-based side of the program. The law enforcement component will take a little bit longer to launch, but we are excited to move forward, and hopefully with this funding and other partners coming to the table, we can bring this to fruition here within the next few months.
Fantastic. Thank you for all your hard work on that. But as you can see in other places throughout the country, this program has worked. And like I said, here's a bunch of statistics of, you know, you can look at it and, well, we really need to get a handle on this program, and we need to get rolling. And the idea behind the $1 million is that not only, we know we can't solve this problem ourselves. It's going to take, you know, the county, Davenport, Bettendorf, the whole region, many partners to solve this issue. The churches, it's going to take many community organizations. We can't do this alone. There's no way. We got to get everybody together, but somebody has to be the first one in, and we're hoping that we're the first one in, and we can bring everybody together and get this thing really rolling out and get it where it needs to be as soon as possible.
I just applaud you guys, and Ms. Dickman, if you're on, you three for bringing this up. We've been talking a long time. I applaud the staff for continuing the dialogue. This has got to be one of the priorities, and I can't applaud you enough to put $1 million, and I hope the council supports it fully, and we get moving, and this happens this year. Thank you.
One of the other recommendations we had was that, it was a gentle one, but that we consider a rename, because there's a lot of discussion in the community about the Juvenile Detention Center and the Juvenile Assessment Center, and they sound like the same thing, and they're certainly, they deal with populations that unfortunately may end, have ended at the Juvenile Detention Center, but the point is different, and the point is diversion and prevention, so we had suggested that perhaps from a public standpoint that might be changed. Mike, is there anything you want to add to this? I mean, I think we've all seen what's happened even in the last few weeks again that brings this obvious.
We have been working on this for a long time, and I, again, applaud the staff. I've had a lot of good conversations with our partners, as Mr. Dunn said. We're having another great conversation next week with them again. They have said generally they're in, but this is the key that we're leading and stepping up right away with a big number to kickstart and get this going, so everybody knows Davenport is serious about this, is totally in, and the other ones, I believe, will be, supporting us in this effort. So again, thank you so much because it's so needed.
Alderman Malik. Mike, who are the other partners, and are there any commitments at all, financially or otherwise?
So I won't, certainly the county and Davenport I've had lots of conversations with. I won't commit them to any number.
No, I wasn't asking for a number, just, is there any commitment from, I don't,
To support this? Yes, there's commitment.
who are the partners?
The county and Davenport. Again, I'm not gonna divulge, our particular conversations, but they're committed to supporting us in this effort.
Well, that's good, I support it as well. Who are we coordinating with for local, social support groups?
I think, Sarah, you might be best, or Chief, you both might
Are
be
you
best
talking
to
about
answer that.
as the service providers, or?
Just any kind of coordination, collaboration with local social services, organizations, NGOs, whatever.
Yep, so Scott County Kids has been a part of the working, our task force, and they are really our conduit into all of the social service providers, in the community. They already have pre-established relationships with all of those social service providers, and so while we don't have all of those providers sitting on our task force, Nicole Mann with Scott County Kids and now United Way as well, both sit on our task force, and they are our conduits to the social service providers for this project.
Perfect. This, if I understand right, this is also going to involve the families, right? The kids and the families
Yes.
and
Yep.
try to do interventions, really.
We hope so.
That's the
Yeah,
key.
that's-
That is the key.
Schools also involved, probably a really good on-ramping, entity for kids and families.
So you really need it.
They were with us at the beginning. They were in the initial meeting. They were in the meeting. We had a big one a year ago. I think they're as supportive as I could possibly think they should, they are very supportive. I don't know who, quite frankly, I don't know who isn't.
I am.
Yeah, I don't know how you would not be, but.
Yeah.
And I just want to add too, you gave two wonderful examples of others, but we used the Denver model initially, the chief went there. So Denver has a good track record that we followed pretty, in depth on how they've worked. And they've maneuvered their center, so we actually have some lessons learned from them that we'll probably incorporate into some of the things we do here. But community needs to know Davenport's serious about it, and we're gonna do it, and again, thank you for helping us fund it.
Well, and I think it's important to say that, my exposure isn't wide to this, but I know staff has been tracking and looking, and this is, again, a concept I was sort of in preparing for this, looking at other areas, they're all over Florida. Florida as a state is doing this. There's one in Fayetteville, North Carolina, it's called something a little different, but it's all about, we have issues, let's deal with it now, and I know that, and you had said, we're kind of learning from the models, Sarah, I believe you talked about the Denver model and how they're kind of going out to people, and how that, we're even looking at how those things have evolved. But the really staff are subject experts on this for sure, so. Anything you want to add to that?
I think that covers it.
I think one thing I will add, Alderman McGinnis, is, we saw that Denver model is a really good model for us. I think the other thing that all of you should know is that we've been working with, a young lady, Molly, who used to work, is very familiar with our area, Molly Barker. She was the director of Scott County Kids at one time. She left here and was the executive director of the Juvenile Assessment Center in that, Denver area, and has subsequently left there and is now the executive director of the National Juvenile Assessment Center Alliance, and they go around the country setting up these juvenile assessment centers. That is their goal. So we're trying to imagine this best for Scott County, for us, right here in our area. And it will be somewhat different than some of our, different ones around the country, because it needs to fit us and our services.
Yes, I just have two more questions. Will this give us the opportunity to leverage funding from the Fed, or any sources of funding from the federal and state?
Yep, so we're pursuing those opportunities. I mean, grants are very specific, especially when they come out of the federal government, so defining grants that are specific to this project, we're looking at, but we haven't identified any yet. We're also working, with our state legislators and advocating for funding at a state level as well.
And I just have one more question, because if you don't want to answer this, but for all the, for all the gun incidents that are happening, how many of them are women?
That's really hard to, many of them, but it's really, I think.
Oh, no, I'm not asking for,
Right.
I did say how many, but I mean,
Sure.
in general.
It's hard to say, yeah.
Okay.
It is definitely.
So I know we don't vote at work sessions if there's no others, anybody got problems with this, so they can move forward and we're gonna do this.
My only, I guess, concern, it's not concern, this is a answer to a very clear and real problem that we have, but, before we officially commit $1 million, I guess I'd like to know a little bit more of what $1 million actually gets us, and how the overall operating model works going forward, because, slide number 2 or whatever said, one of the main goals was not to add more bureaucracy and more costs. Well, if $1 million only gets you your first year expenses, and then you now have more operating expense, you now have new capital purchases down the line, well, that's a lot more bureaucracy we're adding, and so I am for it, because I do think it definitely addresses, one of the major issues we have right now in our community, but, I don't want to necessarily 100% agree to it until we can see if this is a $1 million one-time expense, so then we need $1 million every year going forward, or whatever it may be, that could swing the equation differently as well. So just maybe knowing the cash flow or the expenses would be a little more helpful.
So I can speak a little bit to that, two parts of your question. So the first, as we're looking at budgets of other JACs around the country, and then looking at what we would look to implement here, again, they talked about it's a two-sided model, right? So when both sides are fully up and operational, we expect those annual expenses to be between about $1.1 and $1.3 million annually. That being said, we're only looking right now at launching the community-based side of the model, and that is substantially cheaper to operate on an annual basis. We'll be partnering with an already established service provider. We can utilize their space, hire additional staffing, looking between $300,000 and $400,000 annually. So, again, as Alderman McGinnis and Dunn have mentioned, this is meant to leverage other parties to come in and also provide seed funding as well. But even if you were the only $1 million in, potentially that could last you 3 years to get this up and running as you're bringing other parties on board, operating the community. Speaking to kind of your levels of bureaucracy and not wanting to create additional layers, that's something that our task force has been very cognizant of. We've talked about not wanting to create another nonprofit to create or to compete with all the nonprofits that we already have in the area, which is why we're partnering with people like Scott County Kids and United Way, people that are already established in our community and already have relationships with those service providers, so that we're not duplicating efforts. That's something that we've been very cognizant of. And as we talk with private funders who are interested in also partnering with us, and creating sustainable funding for the long term, that is something that they are also very aware of, and that they want to make sure that we are also not creating additional layers of bureaucracy. So that's something that we've been very cognizant of as a work group, and I think the plan we have moving forward is a very good plan to handle that.
And I'll just add, Mr. Gorman, a year ago, we compared the budget, the proposed budget for this and a budget actual for the Denver model, and they were similar. And he broke it down into public, private, et cetera. And most, I think all entities at the time at the table, and there was a lot of people at the table, all agreed that this is doable. So that's a model that's being used to sustain, assuming everybody plays along. But that's why we thought it was very important to get this going, kicking it off and leading it, and then already had the discussions about everybody supporting. I think if everybody's in, which I think they will be, then we'll be cool. Your concern about where's it going will be divided up pretty good between many entities.
Right. All right.
The upside is, we're not reinventing the wheel. We've got operations that have been successful. You know, making our commitment shows everybody else that we're on board. And I think the other cities in the county will definitely be on board. To make this successful, you know, the public schools have got to buy in. And they got to be, if not a leader, they got to be a significant leader in this. And I'm not saying necessarily financially, but that's where all the kids are coming from.
They have been at the table the whole time, and they're committed, and everybody's shaking their head back there, so I'm not saying something just for me to say. I think I absolutely can say they're committed to it, Ray, and so are our other partners around here. I've had conversations with the leaders of the county and the mayor of Davenport just recently, and things like, good news, great, keep going, do it, we're in. Those are the words I hear, and I'll meet with them again next week.
So what's the next step?
Well, assuming there's consensus, then they have the operating orders to move forward then.
Ours are recommendations, so it's this body who really decides, you know, how we head with this. This was the recommendation today that has more meat on it. It has a lot of immediacy, I believe. We've seen what's been happening even in the last couple of weeks that just keep making the point again. So, but it will be up to, you know, a formal, commitment from the council, which we can't do today. And so if that's something we want to move along, we feel that the other two recommendations, will require a lot more work and building out, and in a probably a more measured way than this. But this right now has urgency, and it's been there for 4 years. It's just, we felt like, as a task force, we're not going to have a chance to do this again. The sale of, this unrestricted funding really gives us an opportunity here that we just aren't going to see again for a while.
I think the word they use of kickstart, because we've been percolating a little bit.
Right.
Now $1 million, we're committed in. They say Davenport's in, everybody else will come.
Mallory, could you maybe just take a moment and, generally speaking, whatever we decide today or like to do or not to do, how does it work of the heritage sale happens on June 1 or whatever, we get $6 million, and then we go through the financials and approvals of doing whatever the recommendations may or may not be. Would we need like a resolution approving a plan, or would it just be as items come up, they go on the council agenda as like single items earmarked to this money, or how would that work?
That's actually a really good question. I think, what I would prefer, because of the amount involved here, is that we probably, and I'll work with Tom on that, probably do some sort of a motion directing staff to implement this plan and specify the amount, just so that we know we have the authority to start working on things up to this amount, and then when it came time to actually spend the funds, then those would be, we would do that and then have to amend the budget to show that we're including them, so.
Kind of wanted to get the general consensus of a go here. Great work here, and then everybody's cool, so that they can then do those pieces so they can give you something formal. But before that, we wanted to make sure everybody is generally cool with that without voting, right? So I see everybody's good. After that, thank you very much. You should be applauded for this too.
All right, so recommendation number 2. This really surrounds a longstanding issue in the community. It came up, as did the Juvenile Assessment Center and council recommendations for what to do with dogs. And it is dealing with our vacant properties in our city. But we decided to take it, as we talked about it, a step further than just using the money to deal with vacant properties. What we're really asking for is designating $4.5 million of the money that will come, which is approximately $6 million total, to a multi-pronged initiative to address vacant and abandoned properties and parcels and their neighborhoods. We have had many really good programs. We continue to have them. We have done great things with federal, restricted federal CDBG dollars in terms of affordable housing. We've done a HACM program, which some people around this table remember, but many don't, that dealt only with vacant properties. We've done the Dream Project. A few years ago, we did East 6th Street, a number of houses affordable houses on East 6th Street to try to jumpstart that neighborhood. But we've never been able or had the funding to do impact projects. And again, we don't have an opportunity with this kind of dollars. So that's really what we're talking about when we're talking about a comprehensive vacant property program. I want to take you back a little bit and go through some of the statistics just to remind you kind of what the area where we're dealing with most of these properties looks like and kind of what our city looks like. There was a 2005 plan, a 2025 plan done in 2005 to define the city by core, Tier 2 and Tier 3 areas. The old core being the old pre-1920, Tier 2 being 20th century to post-World War II, and Tier 3 sort of the 1970s on, sort of roughly. And that plan is hundreds of pages long, and it looks, and if you want it, I've got a copy. I think it's nowhere else in the world, but I have it. Anyway, it looks at many aspects of city development, including vacancy, property, and housing, those kinds of issues. And what we were able to do is take that information and look at it through 2010 census and 2016 American Survey census. So we can kind of get a more up-to-date look at it. And one big point to keep in mind is core area residents are more likely to live in poverty than are anybody else in Davenport, 27.6% versus 16.6% across the core. And they're less likely to be homeowners than residents of other areas. I'm going to show you a few stats on housing units and population and on owner occupancy and vacancy. The pink, the kind of supposed to be orange, looks slightly pink as the core area. The green is the Tier 2, and the kind of grayish is actually the Tier 3 area. So you can see housing units over this time between 1990, we look particularly 1990 and 2016. There was a farm crisis happened between 1980 and 1990, and that dropped things sort of down to a baseline, and we kind of started from there looking forward because you can't compare 1980 at all. But in 1990 to now, we've actually lost housing units in the core area. Now, this may not reflect all the new apartments downtown, but there were like 3,700 housing units demolished in the core area between 1980 and 2000. We've had a very slight increase in the Tier 2 area, and of course, the huge increases are in the Tier 3 areas, which is the newer development. Same thing with population. We've continued to lose population in the core area. We have lost it pretty significantly in Tier 2, which is that second-tier suburb syndrome, which we have to be watchful next on. That's where the decay starts to go once your core starts getting redeveloped. And then Tier 3, 28.4% increase. So obviously, you can see where our city's growing, and it's away from our core and from our older, even our Tier 2 neighborhoods. Owner occupancy and vacancy, it's always been low in the core. It is lower than it was in 1990 right now. Owner occupancy is lower than it was in Tier 2 in 1990, although it's still, 3/4 of the houses in Tier 2 are owner-occupied, whereas less than 50% of the core area are owner-occupied. And then in Tier 3, we're at also a lot of apartments in that area as well, and that's, but that's a growth, that's a change over time, a positive change. And then in terms of vacancy rates, again, the core area still continues to have over 15% vacancy rate, despite the demolition of bunches of units and a bunch of people living downtown. Tier 2 has, and Tier 3 have vacancy rates of about in the 6% area. So a big drastic difference. So we did ask staff, okay, where are these vacant properties? There have been various counts since I've been on council of how many there are, where they are, and so they've graciously provided that. The red dots are where all the vacant properties are, and you can see many are sort of in the center part of our city. There's 300, I think it's supposed to be 26, not 56, with violations that have been identified by Public Works. So these are ones that have come across the radar, there's already issues with them, and they're probably just gonna continue to go downhill. It doesn't mean they're entirely derelict, but we know they're a problem. But there are others that are sitting vacant that may not have, had the engagement of Public Works. But we know, if you live in one of these neighborhoods, you know they're vacant, you know they've been vacant for a while. So that kind of count, is slightly, less specific. But if you add the two together, it's a total of about 620 suspected vacant. This map only shows it is 356, I'm sorry, it is the 356. I asked them to also map this over our low to moderate income census tract. So on the left, you see the whole city, and you can see where the dots are compared to that. Now, those areas to the north tends to be rental areas, Goose Creek, and some other rentals to the northwest. And they tend to be a little, much of that area actually doesn't have any housing in it at all, or has very little housing. But you can see that the core area to the right is almost completely low-income census tract. A little bit, as you get toward the First Ward, the edge of First Ward, then you're out of it. But it's low, it's all low to moderate income census tract. One of the opportunities here to be thinking about is if we adopt a program like this is opportunity zones were established in 2008. They bring it's large redevelopment, and we for areas that have challenges, and it has to be low-income census tracts. We have two. One is Census Tract 109, which is downtown, and a little bit of the neighborhoods around to the west and north and east. And then Census Tract 106, which is in 3rd and 5th and 4th Ward, and it is one of our poorest. It's one of our poorest census tracts. It has a very low home ownership rate. It has almost 33% of the people are below the poverty level. Its median income is much lower. It's at about $30,000 versus the citywide $51,000 median income. And its neighborhood. So lots of our vacant houses are there. Just perhaps an opportunity. We also wanted to kind of look at this as we were going through this okay, what are sales like in these areas? So I worked with a real estate professional who we went through and we kind of looked at this area where all of our low income, where the vacant properties are. We kind of focused on that area, and we kind of split the city along locus. We had the south section, we did it in the west, the central, and the east, south of Locust, and the west, central, east, compared to Kimberly, north of Locust, and that kind of got a lot of the vacant properties. So we just kind of wanted to see, what the sales look like there, and not surprising, we sort of that it doesn't encompass most of the vacant properties, and when you look at the northwest. You actually see a pretty healthy number of home sales, not a lot of home sales, but pretty healthy home sales in the southwest area. They are lower than the area right north of Locust. The low is lower, the average is lower, the high is lower, but there were a number of sales. So this may be an area that has some opportunity because you have kind of you have an area that at least is seeing home sales. You'll see in the other two that the contrast is much greater for the most part. In the North Central, there were 45 home sales, and these are real home sales between July and October of 2021. This is a very healthy time for selling, by the way. 45 sales in the North Central and 23 in the South Central. A high of much higher to the north, and the highs and the low is much lower in the south, and the average is much lower in the South Central section, and a much lower number of home sales. It's almost it's missing one of being 50%. It's even worse in the Northeast. There were 50 home sales in the Northeast, and there were 10 in the Southeast section during this period. Now, there is an anomaly here. There was one house sale in the Southeast that was over $300,000. So that accounts for, most of the sales. The high there is that it was reflected in that sale. It is completely an anomaly. It was a house on the river. It had been restored. It was near Mississippi, and so that is kind of an anomaly for this area. I didn't take it out though, because that's the information that we found. So you can see again, very different, generally in terms of the lowest figure and also the average figure, and the number of sales was phenomenally different, 1 to 5. So we took some of this information. We wanted to talk to people who knew something and had expertise in dealing with vacant properties. Malik is a person that I've run across in my interest in this. He is senior fellow at the Center for Community Progress, which was founded after the mortgage crisis. He was a director of housing and economic development for Trenton, and he is with the National Housing Institute. He has written many, many, many reports on how to dealing with vacancy. This is the heart of his work. How legacy cities come back, what kind of assets they have. And so we reached out to him with real estate information, with sort of some of the statistics he's seen, and he graciously gave us some time to talk to us about some things that we might be able to do in Davenport. So we sent the information to him, and then we did a phone interview with him. It was actually a go-to-meeting interview with him. And again, he was very gracious to share his time with us. And he has some recommendations of a program that I'm going to discuss, and we had some similar recommendations, but he certainly brought a lot to the table. There was also with him on the call an employee of the Center for Community Progress, and he gave his time as well, and we were very grateful to them. So two things he said, Malik said right off, was that he felt like 657A, 10A, and this is the law that we've talked about before, that the city can go in and take property. He said it is likely the strongest property acquisition tool in the country. He was amazed by it. One of the hardest issues is acquiring these properties. We don't have that problem in Iowa. He said, and for him to say, this man knows what's going on across the country. So for him to say that was pretty remarkable. We did, as we continued to talk, we asked, we've, as a city, hesitated to purchase, or we've hesitated to step in and get these properties because we don't want to own them. We don't want to be the owners. He said, you already own the problem. You're boarding them. You're cutting the grass. You're interacting with these. You may, if you don't own them, you own the problem, so you may as well own them, and then you can deal with them if you have a program to deal with them. So he encouraged us to think about that differently. So here's sort of the plan that evolved out of our conversations with him and our own discussions among ourselves, and with staff as well. We talked to CPAD, we talked to neighborhood services as part of making this proposal. So he encouraged us to go big, to try to do hundreds and not dozens, to avoid short term, and go for a leveraging impact into the future. And that says to me, if you guys accept this program as our direction we want to head in, we really need to do some planning and do it right. Not a quick jump, a quick stab at this, but let's think this through and let's really evolve the plan. He strongly recommended starting with a windshield survey of target neighborhoods to assess the status of all properties. This is typically done in cities that are trying to address this problem. He suggested selecting moderately weak, not the weakest neighborhood. He also said notify everybody that's got a house that's potential for taking, and let them know that we have a law that we can take their house, and it might get them off the dime, and maybe they'll be engaged in the solution rather than being a problem. So as we target an area, if we decide, we may want to contact people and say, this is what we can do, and this is what we're thinking about, because they lose all of the value of their property if the city decides to do that. He strongly recommended using strategies for targeted areas should include all available tools, tax certificate purchase, 657A10A, opportunity zone, if there are any kind of other tax credits, like historic tax credits available, that we find a developer that can build new, even if there isn't a demand for more housing on that spot. He strongly recommended that we shoot for a mix of market rate and affordable housing, and that make sure tools are in place to maintain affordable housing within the area. He said he also recommended beautification, so looking at sidewalks, vacant lots, make sure the play equipment, the park says making sure the play equipment looks good. If there are empty spaces and the neighborhood wants them converted into something like a gardens or a park, that we help them do that, and that we partner with banks and local foundations. In many cities, corporate and institutional partners have been great contributors to this. Those were all those were the content recommendations he was making. And for the city's role, and this is something we sort of pulled out, so it's basically, how can the city continue to be an advocate in this? We need to be more than the person, the entity that has the money and doling it out to people or figuring out if they've done it correctly. We have to be actively involved in this process. We have to use the power that we have as a civic organization. So what is the city's role? To use staff or volunteers to conduct a windshield survey. To offer, we think, substantial forgivable loans. We're recommending 10-year loans. Some of the other programs we've had in the past have been you have to be in your house for 5 years. We don't think that's enough. People move. It's not enough. It needs to be 10 years. We want people that want to stay in this neighborhood. And the loan would be a forgivable loan, and it's forgiven over the 10-year time. And these are for people rehabbing homes as single-family properties. We want to open the program to potential owners, developers, and not-for-profits. These dollars are non-income restricted, and so it could really be anybody. We think the city should become actively assisting in transferring properties to new owners through 657A10A. We think that the city should step up and work with banks to preset mortgage programs. It's very difficult for individuals, it was with the HAPM program, for them to get mortgages for derelict houses. And so the city, we feel like, has a role here in sort of going in, sitting down, and we did talk to one bank. We didn't want to take it further until we could talk to you, but we really feel like that the city needs to be setting those meetings. We also think that we would like to see the city within these targeted areas use income restricted federal or state dollars to rehab, build, or even purchase quality prefab homes. There are quality prefab homes. I know every time that we approve CDBG dollars for fixing an older house and it's $260, which is what it costs, or we're building a new one and it's $250 or $300, there's always why are we spending this money? It's expensive, as JJ, you know very well, it's expensive to build houses or to fix houses. But there may be a place there for prefabricated homes that could then be sold as affordable housing, and those dollars can be used for that purpose. I'm not talking about trailers. I'm talking about good, well-built, stick-built homes. I've talked to Bruce about this, and some of our federal dollars can be used in that way. We think we should continue the DREAM programs with existing homeowners, and we need to aggressively pursue additional revenue sources. We need to make these dollars generate more dollars. We think we should require home ownership classes, and, we're gonna suggest that perhaps one of the places we look as we're assessing these neighborhoods is where have we gotten good response for our good neighbor or recognized neighborhood program? Because that says to us that there are people who are invested in their neighborhoods already, and so we might have greater success. Now, what about the role of rental? Well, I want you to take a look at a 1934 map. This is a housing study, and again, the straight line there, kind of in the middle, is locust. These were all the amount of housing that was rental property, was multifamily property in 1934. The darker the color, the more multifamily it was. So you can see that even going back 90 years, almost 90 years, this area has had a very high percentage of rental property. We feel like that there will continue to be a role for rental and for good rental. I know that there have been a lot of conversations around we want to increase the amount of single-family ownership, and we do with this program, with the vacant property program. But we do feel like there's a role for rental and for affordable rental. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the role of housing that most not-for-profits have. And when I asked, people talked about affordable housing in some cases when I talked to you about it. If somebody used affordable housing in their email about, gee, what would you like to see? I called them and said, what do you mean? Tell me what you mean. And so, because I wanted to make sure I understood and that we understood. And most aldermen define affordable housing a little bit more broadly than the government funding description. When I talk about affordable, I'm going to use the capital letter on affordable. That means I'm talking about housing that is more narrowly tied to specific income guidelines. They vary. They're often tied to median income or poverty, some percentage of poverty level. And it is that population that most not-for-profit housing groups serve. And it is that group that the Silos to Solutions plan, housing plan that I sent to you a few months ago, that it addressed people along that spectrum. And people need affordable housing for a lot of reasons. They may be having financial instability that makes a house mortgage difficult. They may need to stabilize income before they can take on those extra responsibilities a homeowner needs, or they may simply not want to be a homeowner anymore. They may be elderly. They may not want to do that, but they still need affordable housing. And we felt like that all current vacant properties in Davenport may not be good candidates for owner-occupied single-family homes. So what we propose within this plan, the rehabilitation of vacant properties as not-for-profit rental units be considered as for inclusion under this program. Now that could be with some caveats. We feel like though that that including them within this plan to revitalize our neighborhoods, which have historically had a large amount of rental, supports the Silos to Solutions pillar of producing new affordable housing units. We don't necessarily recommend including residences that provide group accommodation, and we only recommend not-for-profit rental be considered for inclusion. We believe that not-for-profits are there to deal with affordable housing and to deal with the needs of people, and that is, they are mission focused, and so that's why we're recommending only maybe that not-for-profit rental be considered for inclusion. If a not-for-profit were receiving grants from the program because they were rehabbing a vacant property to sell as a single-family home, that was, they're one of the, they're able to do that whether they sell it as affordable or not isn't our question or decision to make. If they are rehabbing vacant properties for single-family home rental to clients they serve, or if they're rehabbing vacant homes that are conversions as apartment for clients, we might consider requiring anybody participating in this program sign a pilot agreement, because in those cases, those properties go out of the realm of tax-paying properties, and that was a question at our group. So if that is a big issue or concern for folks, I did have staff pull what is the number of residential properties 164. It's not a huge number, not as many as I thought. And about 25 of those, I believe, are city properties. Those are the properties, some of those that will be moving to the not-for-profits as part of the sale of the scatter site. So that's the number in the city right now. So just something to think about. Our next recommendation, Rick is gonna talk
Can we take a
about.
quick break, Mary? Can we take a quick break?
Sure.
That's okay?
Yeah, we're gonna do the discussion, but the people need.
You're, up to y'all.
Take a break.
Take a break. All right, great. That was hard.
This is Maria's favorite topic. Your favorite topic?
Oh.
Very
Oh, I was done. That's fine.
What? Today? Oh, okay. No, I haven't had access to my phone for this.
Closed library, and then invite the press. We don't do anything.
A very funny. We were one room short, I think. What's the problem? I'll email you this. I'll email you this when I'm done. I can't do it right now. I haven't figured out how to do it without. I don't have that.
That helps me, because I'm getting older. I mean, seriously, I think I know how to answer this question. Like, two, three. I don't know. I just want to talk about it, other than a public. I mean, I think I know the general and when you guys think you've done a good job in the past, maybe that's another strategy. Well, that's what everybody's telling me. They're just running around shooting up everything. They're not paying attention.
How you doing, Maria? Hanging in there?
Forgot about her.
She's there.
I'm still here.
You know, they waited a couple this week.
Huh?
Yeah, obviously I know a lot of the history already, so just kind of sitting back a little bit.
Start it again,
Just go. We're gonna catch up later.
okay.
This is our final recommendation.
Size of our neighborhood.
What do you?
Recommendation
So-
number 3.
For dinner?
Recommendation number 3, we always talk about our commercial corridors and our older.
Can I ask you a question about this?
No,
We're gonna come back to
these
that.
together, right?
We'll make this quick,
Well,
and then
we
you
will,
can get right
we
back
will.
to
We
it.
have time to do that, okay, yep.
So we always talk about the older commercial corridors, the Locust Streets, the Rockinghams, Washington, Hilltop, all them. We're always looking for new businesses and small businesses. So we're looking at how do we incent some of these businesses to come to them areas. And this is, we're looking at, maybe we could put $500,000 into that, and we could start bringing some of these to our older commercial corridors, which would help strengthen some of them corridors. I think that's probably one of the hugest things we can actually do. But we need to make the program easy to access for small businesses, who have been left out. Because a lot of the bigger businesses, they can get the loans, but these are all the mom and pop shops that make these neighborhoods go. And they sometimes struggle finding a way to, hey, how do I expand my business? How do I make my business in this corridor look better? So that's what we're looking at there. Offer to start up business, or substantial expansion of existing businesses, targeted to businesses to these neighborhoods, and certain businesses we don't want. I don't know if we can say this, but we really don't want any more taverns. We don't really need any more car lots. We want something that's going to benefit that neighborhood. So, with that's about all I got on that.
Okay, so thank you, Rick. We really felt like the smaller areas were kind of left behind. They don't have the resources to maybe apply for grants. We want simple programs. We want something that a mom and pop can apply for. Because when government organizations often talk about small businesses, they're talking about 80 employees or less. Well, we're talking 10. We're not saying it has to be 10 employees or less. We actually talked about that, but the really small ones that have been there, that are cornerstones, that don't have a lot of resources, that don't have somebody that can spend a lot of time doing grants. We didn't make this really simple, hold their hands. They don't need a lot of money, but, they're very important to our neighborhoods, and having more of those are very important to these neighborhoods. And so that's how that goes hand in hand with our sort of neighborhood redevelopment strategy. I just want to talk a little bit before we go to discussion on these two about partnerships. So, we did reach out to a couple of people. We didn't want to range wide and far because we were just a task force talking about what if. We did go to Quad City Bank and Trust. Jill Dubin is the Community Reinvestment Act officer. She is renowned in the affordable housing community as someone who knows her stuff. People look to her as a leader, and I've known her on the housing cluster for many years, and she sat down and talked with us. I couldn't find a picture of Jill. She would have killed me if the one I found. I didn't want to choose that to her. But she explained the Community Reinvestment Act was established in 1977. Banks are required to assist in various activities relating to low or moderate census tracts or residents. And one example of this that I'm familiar with is the Live Work Rock Island program that provides closing costs and down payment assistance for homes in Rock Island to people within a limited income group. And that income can be defined by whatever. And in the case of Rock Island, people who could apply were employees of companies that had membership in Development Association of Rock Island, whether that business was in Rock Island or not. It does require homeowner classes. That's a pretty classic standard for these kind of programs. And I had an employee at WQAD that got her home through this program. When our television station was a member of DARI, and she was able to purchase a home. So in the case of the Rock Island example, this is the incomes that you're looking at. It's a little broader than what you look at for what we talked about, the big A, affordable housing. And so that's the kind of thing that, you know, I think if this is something that we end up going forward with, we want to have more discussions with more banks. Credit unions typically don't have to do this because they're member-owned, but banks do. And so there are some really good players in the Quad Cities that are involved in this. And again, that would be part of the city's role, is to reach out and have those conversations about how can we look for your support in this that we're doing, and not send our residents out on their own to try to deal with it. I also reached out to the Riverboat Development Authority. Matt Mendenhall has been involved in a number of foundations in the Quad Cities. He's a very well-respected person. RDH has funded a variety of initiatives, affordable housing, economic development, all kinds of things through the years since they were established. He talked to him a little bit about what we were looking at, and he encouraged support of the silos to use Lucian's plan. He was very interested in grants that would help our old business corridors, because that meets some of their economic development needs. He also noted that he sits on other Quad City funding bodies that could be potential investors and recommendations that we present here today. So it was, and again, we didn't go out and talk to every foundation, but we wanted to kind of test the water with people who we knew and say, these are the kind of things we're talking about. So, you know, these are the kind of partners that we're going to need, I think, to help us really grow these dollars the way we need to grow them. So that's really everything about vacant properties and business loans, and now we'll open it up for discussion. Anybody have any thoughts? Alderman Lee? Question?
I have two.
Right.
Kind of unrelated. How did the task force decide the allocation of the funds? What were some of the considerations? You know, the $1 million for the AAC and the
Good question. In terms of interviewing, we had a meeting with Chief Skazorski and Sarah Ott. We talked about the funding for the Juvenile Assessment Center, and we asked, what dollars do you need? And we were looking at a multi-year type grant. So they talked about the program, they talked about the different tracks. We felt like that was a substantial number to get us in the game, that we needed to have put serious or recommend allocation of serious money. And you know, and that was an interest, certainly in, that was an interest, you know, that aldermen had expressed too. There were a number of aldermen interested in dealing with vacant properties and dealing with neighborhoods. And so we felt like we needed to put a preponderance of dollars there. $4.5 million isn't a lot of money when you really start looking at that. But again, if we can really, really leverage these dollars, both for the JEC, for the vacant properties in the neighborhood, then, you know, we can grow those dollars and perhaps, you know, I will tell you, there were some suggestions, and that's in the parking lot. You had that list with, you know, in your memo. There was some suggestion of do a program where we build homes and we use the money from the funding to reinvest, to build more. We did not feel like this was sufficient dollars to do that. We really didn't feel like it would go very far. So that's why we didn't go with that kind of option. And maybe we're ambitious about what can be done with these dollars, but if we're aggressive in reaching out for partnership, we hope that will expand. But that's kind of, and we really wanted to do something for small businesses, and I'm not sure, you know, $500,000 is enough, you know, but, you know, that's, you know, we wanted to do something. We wanted to have something in there for them. Maria, you've been silent. Do you have want to say anything about that?
No, I think that the, you know, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Just, you know, limited funds that, I think we've divvied them up in kind of, well, the best way possible. You know, the assessment center is obviously something very evidence-based, so I love that. the vacant properties, that's an investment that's been needed, and I think will have a virtuous effect, kind of as it becomes cyclical. And then we're kind of throwing this out there. It'll at least create discussion to get more small businesses. So I'm excited about this recommendation, at least.
Rick, do you want to talk about the allocation?
I can tell you $6.5 million seems like a lot of money until you start trying to spend it. It just doesn't go as far as what one might think, so. Like I said, the juvenile assessment thing, that's something we've heard from the community, we've heard from everybody. We had a huge, many discussions with staff of what they thought we needed for that, and we wanted to put a fairly decent number there to make sure it succeeds. We do not want to throw money at something and have it fail. Same with this, so leveraging as much money as we can. It's a great thing, but 6.5 don't go very far.
And I guess the other point I want to make, I think, if you look at where we're recommending these dollars to be spent, it's either in areas or for people that are among the greatest area of need in our city. Certainly there's correlations with children and poverty and some of the issues that we might be dealing with the juvenile assessment center or trying to prevent, in terms of a community-based juvenile assessment center. All these areas where these vacant properties these are properties where poverty is evident, where affordable housing is and more is needed, where and we also know we want to stabilize these areas, that they need stabilization. So we felt like the dollars were focusing back into the neighborhoods probably of greatest need, whether it's the residents, through the Juvenile Assessment Center, or the places where people live. So that was kind of, I think, a big overriding thought too as we were moving forward.
Marion? Go ahead.
I could speak philosophically about recommendation number 2 forever, but just a couple of things is that's an exciting proposition. The one thing about that data is it may not show high sales or a lot of sales in the southeast or the south central, I think it was, but those two areas do adjoin an area that commands some of the highest rent in the entire Quad Cities. So there's certainly a draw there, and perhaps a desire for home ownership. And if I were going to make a program, I would really focus on what is going to affect the marketplace, and really approach it from that perspective. I know you want to be equitable, and you don't want to, it's interesting because do you do a disservice to somebody in an affordable neighborhood if you don't allow the neighborhood to appreciate in value? And do you do them a disservice if it does appreciate in value? Because some would argue that's gentrification. You kind of rub up against that dilemma. But I mean, if I had a perfect program, a program that I think would affect the marketplace the most is I would just put the money in a drawer and I would tell the private marketplace, bring me business propositions and I want to study them. You go find the opportunity because you know where this is viable and where it will create momentum for yourself to keep doing this. And then we help you bridge the gap as far as where your business plan comes up a little bit short. I don't know if I could go on forever, but it takes a certain person to find those marketable opportunities, and those partnerships are going to be very important.
Marion, I think JJ hit it on the head. I was trying to think of a way to best say about being I think you have to be very careful. Every time I was sitting back here listening, and JJ said so well, it comes across as gentrification. It really does. Those type of parts. So what do you do, to really address that without seeming, we got to put those dollars back in the community. but what do? Do you displace them, or it leads to a whole rabbit hole, which we don't want to get into. That's just his problem. If you allow, and I want to shift this, but it goes back to the city. If I heard you correctly. Now we're coming back into the real estate game. You said buying prefab buildings. Isn't that the whole point? We don't want to get to that. Should we just be the middle person, allow them access to the marketplace, and allow the marketplace to do the thing? I think we should probably be aware of that. Let's not get into the real estate business, because now, let's say nobody buy these things. Now what? Now we hold these prefab homes. Let's be the bigger brothers, have those partnerships, give those individuals in it doing this type of thing. Once again, I think we're going to be over our head trying to be real estate agents, trying to be business partners, stakeholders, and what exactly we're trying to do in those communities.
Yeah, just to your point, the prefab homes were specifically not about the marketplace. The prefab homes were, we used, Bruce, is Bruce here? Okay, so is it the CDBG or the Homes dollars that can be used for this?
Home.
Okay.
Yeah, you can't build things with home.
Okay, so the Homes dollars, which are income restricted, and I want to talk to your point as well a little bit, JJ. The Homes dollars are income, those are dollars that come from the federal government, and they are for affordable housing. Every time that I've been on council that we have voted on a house that was rehabbed that cost, $275,000, or we build a house and it costs $300,000, either at council or in media, and I'm not picking on the media. It's like, wow, it's this much money for an affordable house. Well, guess what? That's what it costs when you do it that way. So the idea of the prefab houses was that there's some very high quality prefab houses, but they are, because they're produced in a factory, they're more efficiently built than perhaps how we build them right now or how we rehab them right now. So that was the idea, and it was not to take over the marketplace, but there will still be an element within this of providing affordable housing, and that's all those dollars will do. They don't bring market value housing. So,
you know what I hear from Mary, a lot of people say this, it's happened, it's not just here, it's happening all across the country. I'm a fire realtor. What I hear is that let's disperse these people, it's supposed to be prefab houses, prefab homes, and okay, since we deal with historic homes, we'll give my friends and families, whoever deal with historic homes, give them money as well. Let's push these people out.
no, it's not. I'm going to take exception to that.
No, this is discussion. Go ahead.
It is not to push people out at all. It is to
Bring people in.
It's to bring people in.
It wasn't.
I beg your pardon?
So, home ownership for people, I think I ran through it like several times. So, home ownership, right? That's the key to.
The key is, it's a nuanced plan. The key is home ownership, but we recognize, and we also try to recognize within the plan the need, and something that when we talked to Alan Malik, he said was very important, that we need to make sure that we don't, we are a long way in most of these neighborhoods from gentrifying or pushing people out, okay? We don't want to do that. And he stressed the importance of having a mix of market rate and affordable housing within neighborhoods, and making sure that you put things in place that you didn't push people out. So we're not saying we want all affordable housing, or we want or we're not saying how, but one of the recommendations is, because it seems like the way a criticism that we have heard from council, and I want to be really specific and clear about this, is that either building a house with CDBG dollars or rehabbing a house, people tend to say, wow, that's really expensive. Not because, and it's because of what it takes to do that using CDBG dollars. What I'm saying is, there may be a more affordable option for the city using good quality, high quality pre-built houses that will allow us to do more of this. So rather than spending $300,000 on one house, we might be able to spend $150,000 on two houses. So that's what I'm talking about. So that was a recommendation and an observation. If someone wants to rehab an older home and can find the means and has the means to do that, that's fine. And we have ways of doing that as well, but that may not always be the option. But where we get criticism or comment is often when we're working on houses, we're building them, and it also goes to comp. We're building for this amount and selling for much less. And the CDBG dollars make that difference up. And one of the questions we didn't answer in this plan is the whole question of comp. Because what happens is, often a sale a single sale of a house that perhaps doesn't sell for a lot brings the comps down for every house in the neighborhood. And that's something that we need to continue to talk about, because that is an important thing for market rates. And you would certainly, Patrick, understand that as a realtor also. So, yeah, Kyle had a question. I'm sorry, you had a question a while ago.
Yeah, I've got a few questions.
Okay.
And a couple of comments too. So my first question was, I saw the number presumed 356 vacant properties. So when you say 4.5 million doesn't get you much, or it doesn't get you as much as you might think, do you have an idea of how many vacant properties we can affect with this money? Did you get that far?
No, we played with some numbers, but we didn't try to put a budget together. We're hoping that, and I don't remember when you came in, so I can't remember when you came here. So what we had hoped is, one of the things is that perhaps if we got busy doing this, that some of those that are vacant might on their own means move and be sold for redevelopment, because people are like, they want to get out from under them, and that may move some of those properties on their own.
Sure.
Because there are not all, it's not 356 specifically derelict properties.
Okay.
So,
my second question, and maybe this is for Sarah or Tom or Corey, is where are we at with the 657A process? Have we streamlined it? Do we know how to use it effectively? How many houses have we brought over? Because again, this is another, we're into trying to rebuild our central neighborhoods, and we keep mentioning that 657A is a major component of that. But if it's not an effective tool, we've got to stop trying to build programs based off of it.
So, I think, with 667A, I think we understand the tool mechanism now, like we've been able to get a couple houses through that, so it is a viable tool to use.
Is it couple two?
We're at 3 now, we went after 6, got 3, because there's a process you have to go through. But I think in the past, we never really applied the process to really do it, so we went through this, okay, can we make this happen, how feasible is it, and then what that is as part of. So you can get the property, it's easier for us. I think we have a better relationship with the county on this now, to where we have better work relationship, that we're gonna start doing this so we can get help.
I mean, I think it's been 3 years since we had the conversation about the DREAM program, where we funded that, and the conversation we had was we wanted to turn over a dozen properties every 6 months or something like that, and you're saying we've done 3 in 3 years? I mean, I guess part of my pushback on here would be, if you're serious about this, we've got to get better at utilizing that tool. I mean, we've got to get seriously better at it, and there has to be a commitment, because 3 or 1 a year on 657A is not going to get us there. You're going to say, I have all of this money, but I can't spend it.
I think they did 3 in last year, and I think there was a 4th, and the person that had it ended up donating it or something. I don't think I'm making that up. It was
To 180, yeah.
to 180. So in that case, one that we would have taken, they went, we give up, and they gave it away. So now it's being done. So I agree with you, and I agree with you, and it's been more than 3 years, okay? It's been more than 3 years.
Yeah.
So, yes, absolutely. And when you have one of the leading vacant property experts in the country saying this is the most powerful law in the country, yes, and we know that it works in other cities. So it has to be used. It has to be an essential part of this, because it still is a valuable tool. And we did, I think, 3, it was last year when they finally did it, so
Okay.
I agree with you.
All right, and then another comment, and I'm gonna, talk about, because it's come up, gentrification, and we need to be really, really careful about this, because gentrification means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, and we are not through this displacing anyone, okay? And you have to understand that reinvestment in our heritage neighborhoods is not negative gentrification. If you can't invest in these neighborhoods because it's gentrification, then what you're saying is never invest in our poorer neighborhoods, right? You have to reinvest in them, but you have to do it in a way that does not displace people. Strong Towns has a lot of literature about complex views on gentrification and redevelopment in Rust Belt cities or Midwest manufacturing cities, which we qualify as. And what happens in Davenport, if we go ahead with a plan like this, is not the same as in San Francisco, a developer coming in, buying out a neighborhood, and then building high-rise $500,000 condos. It's just not the same thing, okay? I mean, we would be lucky if we could take $4.5 million, fill in 75 housing or vacant properties, and bring home ownership to 75 new people in our central city. That would be incredible. That is nowhere near displacing people to bring in high-rise condos for the wealthy. It's just two different things, and we have to nuance that conversation. Before this weekend, I'll send you out a bunch of information I have on the stuff I've read, and encourage you guys all to read on it as well. That's it.
Before I come back to you, Matt, did you have a question?
I also, like Kyle, have a handful of questions or things I've been jotting down over here, but to piggyback kind of right off of Kyle's and even some of the comments that Alderman Peacock was getting at is I do think an area we're missing, and I don't know how we'd avoid it. I don't know if we have enough money to do it ourselves to partner with someone, but I do think the home ownership aspect is kind of missing when we talk about some of the problems we see of why we need the JAC and related to our crime rates. And one is just not having stable housing and not having home ownership, and showing that home ownership is a key way to breaking that cycle. This program's focused on fixing abandoned homes and fixing them up, getting to the people that need them, but a lot of times the people that truly need them are so low that they don't even have the means to get the very basic, simple down payment to get into the house, or don't know they can get to the house. I don't know if it's a partnership through us or something we do, or through a non-for-profit, or a whole different endeavor that we're going down of figuring out a way to get home ownership to brand new, first generation homeowners, to truly try to target to break the cycle, because that's how I think you really win here. Of not only are you fixing your abandoned home issue, but you're then also getting those homes somehow to the people who need it the most. So it's a win-win type of thing under that scenario. That all also being said, though, when the way to be truly effective and to really knock this out, and it's what Alderman Condon talked about before with the dream, is almost taking like one street and fixing it up right away and doing things like that. But with that, you then can get into a fishy game of like maybe picking winners and losers, because there are going to be winners and losers in this scenario. So I think with this program, it would be nice to maybe try to, before we even look at like who owns what or where we're going, to figure out a data-driven approach to fixing these homes or tackling these homes. That way we're not picking winners and losers in that sense. We're trying to be as unbiased as possible, have the data drive us to where we go within the city. The other thing that I was thinking about is with the dream related to this, on doing both, do we create a sub-dream, or do we change the dream for a couple years where, we say, hey, we're coming in on First Street in order to, fix the 100 block of First Street. There's 5 abandoned homes here that we're gonna pay with this $4.5 million, and there's 5 people that still own their homes. Well, now you 5 people qualify for the dream project, so that way you are leveraging the kind of a 1-for-1 type thing. Or do we still keep the dream in the same areas that it currently is? The other thing I thought about too is when we talk about what the greater good that this could have, do we try to leverage some sort of larger economic development program with this to maybe try to attract brand new people to our community? Because, you know, a lot of times we talk about, well, we have new growth here in Davenport, or there's more population here in Davenport. Well, we really just took 1,000 people from Rock Island, and we're not it's a net zero type thing. Good for Davenport, but we as a community didn't necessarily grow. So is there a way we can partner this program with economic development to truly try to grow the region, grow our community as well? And then my only other concern, and we kind of talked about it, but I mean, the biggest concern with the housing program is just when we do this, the people who will probably truly be the biggest losers are the people who have owned their homes for 30 years that are on a fixed income, and their property taxes now just went through the roof because their neighborhood now has seen this growth that it's never seen before in their lifetime. And so how do we address that? And does that come with some tax credits that we can maybe work with developing for them to help them out, or some other monetary program where these people who have lived in there for 30 years and are now on a fixed income, and yes, they could sell their house and capitalize those gains, but that's probably not the right answer, and that's not something you want to do. So those are the people that I think we also should probably think about with this. And that is all I have on the housing, but I do have comments on small business.
Sure, go ahead, that's fine.
So with the small business, just have you guys defined at all what we're providing? I know we say provide financial assistance to small businesses, but is that capital?
Hang on.
Business classes?
When we started this process, it was here's $6.5 million, go spend it. Come back with recommendations to spend it, right? So we're bringing you concepts, ideas. None of this is flushed out, how any of this is gonna be. We're asking you, is this what you want to spend this on? Or do you want to spend it on a park? Or do you want to spend it on streets? Or do you want to spend it on alleys? You asked us what you want us, how would you spend that money? We're giving you a concept. We didn't want to break down into the weeds and come back with all these elaborate plans, and we're going to, we can do this, if that's not what you wanted to do, right? So I guess what we're asking is this the concept and direction you guys would like to go, and then some of us, whoever, need to work with staff to figure these programs out, right?
Yeah, and I mean, it's just when you say small business, and then you just say invest in small businesses, that is the broadest concept I've ever heard.
I see what you're saying. I understand what you're saying, yes.
We have a small business resiliency program that we've provided $500,000. That could be a model. I'm not saying it is. But I agree with Alderman Dunn. They would like to have a program developed, the way I read it, you could provide $500,000 to small businesses, however it's identified, to help them. Now, they didn't specifically, and I talked to them about it, please don't give the details because we want to make sure you guys are all cool with whatever particular thing it is. I think, if council agrees that these are the 3 areas to do it, then there's a lot more discussion that needs to happen. Just where you're going.
But at that point, that one, I would say of the 3 recommendations, that was the most amorphous. So what you're saying is amorphous, and it is amorphous. We had discussion, we probably had less discussion about that, but we wanted to include it. Again, it's more a concept. The one, we spent more time on the housing one because it's more complicated, but we wanted something for small businesses, so it's certainly open to, we just don't feel like there's enough, and we see a need in combination with these neighborhood areas. And so we see that, you know, those are a little bit hand in hand, so.
And I guess with that one, I would probably, before I say yes to that one, I do think it needs some sort of goal or more definition to it, because, you know, is it to attract new businesses to the area? Is it to strengthen the ones we have? Is it to do facade?
We said a new or what we said, whether that's what people want, was new or extensive, expansion. Those were actually criteria in the plan, so, but that's what we said.
And then my last comment was small business, that I know that a lot of you guys do not agree with me on, but I don't agree at all with the no alcohol standpoint. I get it, I know where you guys are coming from, but we've already talked about this from my perspective with the zoning, that there are plenty of cases where a good brewery, a good distillery, a good even bar/restaurant have literally completely changed neighborhoods to make them now $1 million condo areas that it's all because one good business has come in. So I really don't like that we only view bars as the handful of bad ones that we have that are predatory on neighborhoods. I wouldn't want to see something written in there saying this can't go to a brewery or can't go to a winery, can't go to a distillery, just because we've had bad experiences with it in the past, because that's I think there is still a potential there that we could flip a neighborhood or attract brand new people to a neighborhood by one of these good businesses moving in. My favorite one, that not only do I like their beer, but they also have a heck of a story, is Lakefront Brewery in Milwaukee, and they bought an old pump station from the city of Milwaukee, and it was a overgrown road that no one lived on, and now literally there's $1 million condos being built next to it. So over 30 years, they've completely changed the neighborhood.
This is my second question. Interestingly enough, I had a chance to attend a Civil Rights Commission training on redlining in the Davenport area. That was very well done. And your map, this is for the second one. And your map, interestingly enough, overlapped
Absolutely.
the areas that were very carefully redlined, especially Locust and South. And also with the 2008 housing crisis, a lot of people who were right on the line just lost. And I know, going through a very expensive divorce with very unstable income, I had mortgage people trying to force me into $350,000 mortgages. So that was, there was no way I could afford it. So I think, first of all, I like your three. I looked through the parking lot, and I like the three that you guys picked, okay, the three recommendations. I think it's really important to focus on the abandoned, those headed for demolition, and those open lots to get that infill going. And I think that's what we're talking about, is not creating a diaspora of poor people spread out throughout Davenport necessarily, because having done a lot of work with federal highways, you may have people with income instability or high rentals, but you may have very stable neighborhoods in those where they depend on each other for taking care of dogs or kids or, helping clean house, or somebody fell down. I think we need to focus on the neighborhood stability as well and try to support that rather than creating a diaspora. I agree with you, Patrick. That's a real concern. And one of the first things I wrote down was gentrification as a concern. So I think what we're trying to deal with is all those problems created during decades and decades, 100 years of redlining. The 2008 crisis, the 1980 farm crisis, where everyone lost their major income. We've seen houses go from ownership to rental. I've got that in my own neighborhood up there on Cheyenne, where people did own them, and every one of them is a rental now. And we've got people of color living in them because they weren't able to continue owning them. You know, they all got bought out. So I completely agree with what you're doing. I'm sure that your discussions with Mr. Malik gave you some clarification on that whole concept of not creating a diaspora for people and supporting those stable neighborhoods and helping to improve that stability. And I completely support the infill and fixing the houses when we can. Oh, by the way, what you're talking about, Dean, in terms of the prefab houses, there's some really nice ones out there. That's real common in the South, where someone will make a slab, buy a house, put it on. There's got nice porches, which encourages good neighbors because you see each other and you talk to each other and you support each other. I think we've got a really strong good neighbor program now that we can really use to, whatever we're doing out there to help create those stable neighborhoods. I think that program is becoming mature under Chief Sikorsky and Nevada, and I think they're doing a great job. So even with income instability, we may have neighborhood stability, and I think that's really important. So I like the three. I think your focus on the abandoned, the demolition, the open lots, the infill is really important. And I think what happens is we can lose sight of the focus. And I think we need to keep focusing on that. And like you said, every program we've got out there that will help completely support stabilized neighborhoods through whether it's good quality rentals, home ownership, whatever, while still not blowing up the neighborhood. Yeah. Yes, Mr. Khan.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
And Ms. Dickman will say something? Ms. Dickman too.
Okay.
First of all, great discussion. Marianne, we have plenty of tools we don't use properly. But the role of government kind of ties in with Patrick and JJ. Public safety and infrastructure. Take a look at our core neighborhood. I live in a core neighborhood. Explosion of crime. And this year, I am scared what's going to happen with the weather warming up. We have decaying infrastructure in the core neighborhoods. So the two basic responsibilities of government, we're failing at. Not so much because of what the city of Davenport does, particularly on crime. Our courts have a revolving door of the criminals, and they all end up back in our core neighborhoods. So the youth center, the youth project should be our priority, With this extra money, let's not go off the deep end and come up with new programs. We got programs. Let's be conservative and let our staff work with it. But crime, deteriorating neighborhoods. You can't take people to come in a neighborhood if they're going to be woken at night by gunfire. And I hear it every day. So our police department, they do everything they possibly can, but the neighborhoods are victims, the police department's victims for the actions of our courts. So, feel-good projects, let's try to tackle our first responsibility, protecting the good people of Davenport. We shouldn't have to show people how to be good neighbors. We got to be good neighbors. If you can't be a good neighbor, gentrification might be the way to go. So, nuisance properties, habitual nuisance properties, we have the tools, but they continue to be a nuisance property, and that's That's the city of, you know, I don't recall ever sitting in a budget meeting, and maybe Mike can, but these are issues that we've talked about year after year after year at budget and goal setting. Again, we're still talking about it. I'm still dealing with the same nuisance properties that I've dealt with for the last 25 years. We got tools, but we don't address it. And it's not because the council hasn't, requested it, demanded it. For some reason, nothing ever gets done. So,
So do you support these three things?
no,
You don't support the JAC?
yeah, I can do that. Well, that's our priority.
Okay. Anyone else?
Alderman Dickman, and then Alderman Condon again. Maria?
You ready for me? All right. So I think Alderman Dorman had said something about the possibility that rising assessment and therefore taxes could potentially risk pushing some people out. And so I think this might be a question for Tom, but just on a technical level, could we do some sort of an assessment freeze or a retroactive something, a hardship variance, so that we can hopefully secure against that kind of thing happening? We don't want to end up accidentally pushing anyone out. I know like California had some issues with a differential, but I don't think that our taxes would go up quite that starkly.
Ms. Hickman, Mr. Warner's not here.
But I've written down your notes, question.
Okay, but yeah, I think I would think that there's some sort of mechanism we can use to try to avoid that problem. Thank you.
You know, sometimes those things are for seniors or income, I think particularly I heard seniors, you know, or income based, and yeah, I would, and we do other things, but it's a very low income, like for sewage and, or for garbage. So, that's something certainly, I mean, the other flip side of this is that the bad thing when someone's lived in their house for 50 years and when they go to sell it because they've got vacant properties all around, their house isn't worth anything, you know, so it's, you know, it's, I certainly don't want to see people pushed out because of property tax, going, you know, rising property taxes. I don't know, there may be a state law that governs that, but that would certainly be something to look at as well, especially for people who are long-term people in their home.
Thank you for another chance to speak.
Oh,
So,
all right.
1 and 3 are very easy to support, and 2 is maybe just as exciting, but just hopeful that we can get a really targeted approach to it. And I felt like I was inarticulate when I was speaking the first time, so like you always get dragged into the conversation of gentrification, and I'll just say raising property taxes and assessments is the goal when you reinvest in the central city. We're sensitive to gentrification. We know what that looks like, but we need to put that aside and move forward. The real estate market in Davenport, Iowa moves glacially. And it's moving in the wrong direction right now in certain neighborhoods. We should be so lucky for the opportunity to nudge that glacier back in a different direction. And my specific concern is where the vacant property that we are able to acquire are at may not directly overlay with where the marketplace opportunities are at. So I think, similar to what Mr. Dorman said, is that, yeah, we do need to have a focused approach on a block space at a time or something like that, because the goal should be not to spend the money and step back and say, we did a lot of good and now we're out of money. It should be, we did a lot of good and look at continuing to grow.
Right, right, and hopefully, we would be able to, I mean, and this may be overly ambitious, but if we can leverage other dollars, you know, mark private and others, if we could look at several areas, so we're, you know, we're looking at areas that aren't the weakest, in the city, which is one of the things Malik said, don't pick the weakest area, pick, you know, area with, that's why when I was talking about, we looked at where home sales were. Now that, you know, that's something, you know, that's, you know, and in the Southwest, we saw that section actually did well. So that's what I meant. And that's not scientific and it's not exactly data driven, But those kinds of tools to say, where are our best opportunities? And then where does that align with maybe our old commercial corridor, if it does? You know, an old commercial corridor. So that's kind of what that's kind of what we were trying to get at, although we didn't, get it completely for sure. But I hear you. And I agree with you. We didn't mention gentrification in here. You have to go, if you're like me and you've lived in Chicago and you pay $5,000 a year in real estate taxes for a few years, that's gentrification, all right? Don't talk to me about it. Unless you've lived in an urban area, I don't think people, where development is fast and blocks are clear and people are kicked out, we are in a different situation here. The demand is not there, and we don't want to build it so that we don't want people. We don't want this part of Davenport to be like other parts of Davenport, where you do have to have a certain income before you can live there, okay? I don't want that. I don't want my neighborhood like that. I'm not interested in a neighborhood like that. So I think it would take a seismic shift for Davenport. We have an opportunity, so I think we can, I'm with you, I understand that. Great.
Anyone else? So I think if I can summarize, you guys certainly throw something at me if I don't. So the first recommendation, JC, everybody is on board, $1 million, we'll work to implement. Yep, roger that. The second one, I think, if I read the room a little bit, a little more discussion's needed, a little more particular, maybe, points that need to be added. Yeah, I know you wrote down some notes and maybe a future discussion topic. I think those are three good choices, but maybe to get the council on board to have the staff execute a program, maybe a little more discussion. The third one I think is good, but if I read everybody, they're fine with it, but maybe a more particular, what exactly are we trying to do outside of give money to small business? Anybody have a problem with what I just said? Generally? Okay, so Roger, the Spiegel says yes to that. So one, we're doing the JC, we're leading it, we're putting money up, and the other people will help us, and great work for the staff. I see that the good chief had to get out to his, wherever he has to go for fun. Ms. Scott said, thank you very much to the staff again for continuing to keep this on board, and you guys, again, for committing to have Davenport lead that. And then to the, Mr. Dunn, Ms. Dickman, and Ms. McGinnis, thank you very much for the in-depth research and advice to pursue this, because I think those are three really important things. And you've done yeoman's work for it. You've got a go on number one. You've got a working method on number two, and probably a go on number three. So thank you very much for that.
Excellent report. Excellent work and excellent.
She said, yep, very good. Right in detail.
Yep.
Anyone else?
Very
Just
professional.
when again, Bruce, are you expecting we'll actually get what's the actual, we'll get the money date, what everything will close?
I'm guessing it'll be July or later.
So we have quite some time to hash this out.
We're gonna move on to the first one. It's not a waiting on the counter thing. Good job.